What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. Today, your Pathfinder 2nd Edition preview content rolls right on with the one, the only, the Monk class preview is finally upon us. I'm super stoked. I can't wait to dive into what is one of my favorite classes, or at least for min-maxing's sake, favorite class dips in Pathfinder 1st Edition. It's going to be a good vlog. As always, if you're liking what you're seeing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, Black Dragon Gaming is supported 100% through patronage. This episode of your Pathfinder 2nd Edition preview content was brought to you in part by Joseph Harvilla. Thank you so much for your help, my friend. Now, let's get to it. So, in Pathfinder 1st Edition, the Monk was either the strongest martial class or the weakest, depending on your point buy, depending on the level of magic in your setting. Perhaps I'm a little biased, but what I mean by that is, in a lower point buy, a monk classically suffers from what we know as multiple ability dependency, or another way to say that is the monk was pretty mad. You needed, at least at first, before things like the Agile enchantment on an amulet of Mighty Fist, your strength to hit, your dexterity and wisdom for armor class, your con for hit points. Of course, your intelligence and charisma are both probably dumped to the ground, but in a 15-point buy, that's still a pretty big mountain to climb. This is somewhat alleviated by the Pathfinder Unchained book and the Unchained Monk, who got a higher hit dice, a full base attack progression at only the cost of losing his goodwill save. Nevertheless, you still need a lot of things to go right for the monk to really shine. That said, if you can get a lot of these things to go right, the monk will be one of the strongest contenders on the board, short of a full caster. With some magic items in Pathfinder 1st Edition, it's not hard for a monk that has good dexterity and good wisdom, perhaps maxing them both out, plus bracers of armor, plus your amulet and your ring and your other shenanigans, to have a higher armor class than the dude in full plate with the big tower shield. Most of my builds in Pathfinder, if I'm trying to build to optimize, will dip monk or the scaled fist or Norn Kith archetype for the monk that would use charisma instead of wisdom, respectively, because there's no reason to not do that, at least purely in the power gaming aspect. On the subject of monk archetypes, monks could do pretty much whatever it is you wanted them to do in Pathfinder 1st Edition. The Qinggong monk had a limited spellcasting ability. The Zen archer had probably the best archery skills in Pathfinder. At least it's a very close tie with the Soha, who could flurry with bows as well as with any weapon he had weapon training with. In Pathfinder 1st Edition, the class, super strong. Now let's see what's going on in 2E, shall we? Quote, monks choose whether their key ability is strength or dexterity, which will determine the DC of some of their abilities. Their selection of initial proficiencies looks pretty different from most classes. First off, they have expert proficiency in all their saving throws. Monks aren't trained in any weapons, but they are trained in all unarmed attacks. They also get Powerful Fist, which increases the damage die of their fists and lets them make lethal strikes without penalty when using normally non-lethal attacks. Further, they're untrained in armor, but get graceful expertise at first level, which gives them expert proficiency in unarmored defense. Everyone else is only trained. So right off the bat, you get to decide at creation if your monk is a sumo wrestler or if your monk is a dude from a kung fu movie. That is to say, are you strength-based or are you dex-based? Being good at all the saves is very reminiscent of the old monk. Losing weapons is weird though, for sure. I definitely had a monk that was very successful back in the day with nothing more than a holy quarterstaff and maybe a bunch of templates, but the holy quarterstaff was his weapon, to say nothing of weapons like the nunchaku, the sai, any weapon with the monk special ability in Pathfinder 1st Edition. Now we're just punching dudes. Also, the fact that we're untrained in armor but get graceful expertise leads me to believe that you don't need to dip monk to be the unarmored awesome guy anymore. If everyone else is trained in unarmored defense, I'm imagining that means a +1 to AC just for having it. Anywho, to continue on, quote, they get one last class feature at first level, Flurry of Blows. This is a single action that can be used once per round to make 2 strikes using an unarmed attack. If both hit, the damage is combined, not unlike pummeling style or clustered shots in 1st Edition. Both of these attacks take the multiple attack penalty normally, so usually the monk will be making the second attack at a -4 since a fist is agile. Flurry of Blows is a huge advantage, letting the monk attack up to 4 times in a round, or letting the monk have plenty of actions to move and attack in a single turn. The monk also will receive incredible movement at level 3, which increases his speed as long as he's not wearing armor. That starts as a 10-foot increase and goes up by 5 feet every 3 levels. So yeah, that's pretty much what I thought Flurry of Blows would be in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I think it's what a lot of the community was thinking as well. To be honest, I think it's perfectly fair, though we don't know the damage die of a monk's unarmed strike yet, for that second attack to be at no penalty or maybe a lessened penalty, because it's probably not going to hit as hard as that dude with the great axe or the great sword or the gun later on down Pathfinder 2nd Edition's road, but combining the damage does seem to mean that you'll be able to break DR of things that much easier. That said, of course, that 4th attack is probably almost always going to miss at a, -12 penalty? Well, maybe at higher levels. Anyway, moving on. Quote, "Because monks can defend themselves in so many different ways, we wanted to let the monk pick how his saving throws improve. His saves increase at 7th level through the Path to Perfection class feature, which lets him increase a save's proficiency rank to Master. The second Path to Perfection at 11th level lets a monk treat any successful save as a critical success instead, as long as he has Master proficiency in that save. The monk gets his third Path to Perfection at 15th level, which he can use to either increase his proficiency rank in another save to Master, or progress his proficiency at a save in which he's already a Master to Legendary. That doesn't feel quite as good, I guess, as the monk who had 3 really good saves in Pathfinder 1st Edition, but I get why we're doing it, and it feels good that you can flavor your monk that way. Is his Path to Perfection improving his fort save by sitting under a waterfall, or improving his reflex save by having a bunch of rocks thrown at his head, or maybe even improving his will save by having somebody throw a bunch of mental rocks at his head, but that's an entirely different story. Moving on. The monk's unarmored defense proficiency also goes up as he levels, first to Master at 13th, and then to Legendary at 17th. You'll notice that the monks no longer add their wisdom modifiers to AC, which is due to a few factors. Real quick, I just gotta say, called it. I thought they'd have maybe like a class feat or something like Divine Grace for the Paladins, but it makes total sense. That's the reason we dipped Monk in Pathfinder 1st Edition, was because we'd get our Wisdom, or sometimes again Charisma, to our Armor class, which was incredibly powerful. What Paizo tells us is, depending on the Monk's Dexterity modifier, the gulf between a heavily armored character and a Monk without armor is extremely low. So adding even more bonuses would put the monk really far ahead, which it truly does. Second, adding more than a single ability modifier to a check or DC now really distorts the game. It did before, but I mean, I'm not complaining. I enjoy playing that way. Third, we have another role for wisdom to play in the class and wanted it to be optional, so monks aren't dependent on many different ability scores, giving you more flexibility with how you can build a monk character. Now that part I can get behind, because again, the 1st edition monk was super mad. Now if you don't need your wisdom, it's just your strength or dex, probably dex, I imagine, because you want to buff your armor class, unless you can do some weird, like, overhand chop with both your hands for strength and a half or something, fighting style, con to not die, and maybe just a little bit of mental stats so you're not sitting there doing a whole lot of nothing outside of combat. Anywho, moving forward, it goes without saying that the monk's unarmed attacks get better as he levels up. Magic Strikes at 3rd level makes the monk's unarmed attacks magical, and increases his proficiency rank to Expert. At 5th level, Mental Strikes causes them to be treated as Cold Iron and Silver. At 17th level, Adamantine Strikes make them act as, yeah, you guessed it, Adamantine. At 9th level, Fierce Fury increases the damage dice of a Flurry of Blows by 1 step whenever both strikes hit. And at 19th level, the monk has developed Perfected Form, meaning that when he makes an unarmed attack, he can treat any die roll lower than 10 as if he'd rolled a 10. Not bad. Yeah, that's pretty cool, especially when we're making 4 attacks and taking all those huge penalties. Though, of course, I imagine even taking 10 on the attack still won't be enough in some scenarios, especially in high-level play. But, hey, if your monk decides he wants to go kick goblins in the face at level 19, he's a little more equipped to do so. Anywho, next up we're looking at some monk feats. Alongside those feats, we'll take a look at the iconic monk as he appears in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hey, wait a minute, he's still holding his temple sword. He's not proficient with that. Just kidding. The first feat we see is Monastic Weaponry. It's a level 1 feat that allows a monk to use his unarmed attack proficiencies as well as any monk abilities that normally work with unarmed attacks with simple and martial monk weapons. There you go. At level 4, Brawling Focus gives you the critical specialization effect for anything in the Brawling weapon group, which means if you critically hit with your unarmed attacks, the target might be slowed 1 on its next turn. Not bad. Next up, it's the iconic Stunning Fist. Stunning Fist in 2nd edition takes 2 actions, and you make an unarmed strike. If that strike deals damage, the target has to succeed at a fort save against your class DC based on either your strength or dex, or be flat-footed for a round, or stupefied, too, if it critically fails. Man, I'm never gonna get away from making that, am I? Anyway, if your strike is a critical hit, the target's saving throw result is treated as 1 category worse, and if it critically fails its save, it's stunned for a round. At level 4, you can pick up Deflect Arrows, which is a reaction that gives you a +4 bonus to AC against a ranged weapon attack, so no longer just, oh, you're shooting at me? Nope. Flying Kick lets you use 2 actions to jump and make a strike at the end of your jump. You can even long jump, which is normally 2 actions, as part of your flying kick, which the blog notes potentially lets you move very far before you strike. You know, for all those Liu Kang players out there. We can also use up 2 actions to Ghost Strike, which lets you target touch, or Wall Run, which lets you, run up vertical surfaces like walls at your full speed. Next up, we're looking at fighting styles. The monk will receive stances. First up, we're looking at one that starts with Crane Stance. Quote, a stance takes 1 action to enter and can be used only in an encounter. You typically stay in a stance until you enter another stance or get knocked out. In Crane Stance, you gain a +1 bonus to AC and get better at jumping, but the only strikes you can make are crane wing attacks. Those deal 1d6 bludgeoning damage and have the Agile, Finesse, Non-Lethal, and Unarmed traits. These aren't too different from normal fist strikes, but the Heavy Dragon Tail attack does 1d10 bludgeoning damage and has the backswing trait like a club instead of Agile or Finesse. If Crane Stance isn't enough, you can pick up Crane Flutter, which is a reaction that increases your AC against a melee attack and lets you immediately riposte with a Crane Wing Strike at a -4 if the triggering attack misses. Nice. Each of the stances in the playtest rulebook has 1 special attack tied to it, but the blog says that Paizo could see them expanding on them in the future. At level 16, also you can pick up Master of Many Styles, which lets you enter a stance as a free action at the start of each of your turns. Next up, we're looking at our ki. Quote, you know how I said there's a role for wisdom? Well, that's where ki powers come into play. And when I say powers, I mean powers. They're spells just like other powers, such as the wizard's school powers or the cleric's domain powers. You gain access to ki by picking up the first ki power feat, Ki Strike, which gives you a pool of spell points equal to your wisdom mod, which you can spend to cast Ki Strike. That power is a verbal casting free action that you can use when making an unarmed strike to get a +1 bonus to your attack roll. Our spell points will also allow us to teleport with Abundant Step, fire a Cone of Force with a Ki Blast, so suddenly we are dragon monks, I can dig it. And also we're gonna see Quivering Palm return to 2nd edition. Quivering Palm costs us 2 spell points. Taking the 16th level feat to get this spell increases your spell point pool by 2. Quivering Palm is an 8th level power. Its casting is a somatic and verbal casting. Its duration is 1 month. Make a melee unarmed strike, dealing damage normally. If you succeed and the target is alive, anytime during the duration you can spend a verbal action to speak a word of death that could instantly slay it, depending on its fort save. On a success, the target survives, the spell ends, and the target is bolstered against it. On a failure, the target is stunned for 1 round, but survives. The spell's duration continues, but the target is bolstered against being killed by Quivering Palm for 24 hours. On a crit failure, the target dies. If you cast Quivering Palm again, any previous Quivering Palm you had cast ends. So yeah, that's coming back. That's a thing. A month, that's a long time. I never really used this in Pathfinder 1st edition because most of the monks I played would trade away Quivering Palm for something else. But the flavor of Quivering Palm was and remains super sweet. You walk up, tag some dude in the face, walk away, wait, 14 days, spend your verbal action to speak a word of death. And so it was. What are you guys thinking about the monk? Is this still a class you'll be playing in Pathfinder 2nd edition? Are there any other key powers or abilities from archetypes you'd like to see come back for the 2nd edition monk? And would you like to play a monk in Doomsday Dawn? Because time's running out to follow this card right up here and enter into our giveaway. 6 lucky subscribers are gonna play Doomsday Dawn right here on Black Dragon Gaming. And if we can get our Patreon up to like $300 a month, give or take, I'll run a second party of 6 through before we wrap up today. I will be out of town this weekend with the Inn of Planar Crossroads because they're all flying to St. Louis for the St. Louis Comic-Con, which doesn't sound like that much of a crazy thing, but some of them are flying in from Western Canada to hang out with each other and also me. I still don't know exactly how to feel about that, other than I'm super honored that these people think I'm cool enough to come fly to my state. Regardless, I'll be spending most of the weekend with those guys, so I won't be making the Friday blog video on Saturday morning. Instead, it's probably going to come out late Sunday, early Monday. Either way, we'll get it to you. Anywho, enough about that. The next episode of your Pathfinder 2nd Edition preview content drops at the end of this weekend sometime.